Everyone wants to consider themselves a good person at heart. If you ask someone if they were a good person, they'd probably say yes. And when we want a generic compliment for someone, we tell them they're nice or they're kind, because it's a pretty safe assumption that they'd consider it a compliment. But is this really the case? What if we were to really put our morality to the test, using a famous passage from Plato's Republic? This is the famous story of the Ring of Gyges. This story comes from one of the characters, Glaucon, who is trying to argue that no one is just willingly, but only when compelled. No one believes justice to be a good thing when it is kept private, since whenever either person thinks he can do injustice with impunity, he does it. So Glaucon tells this tale about a shepherd who worked for the king of a place called Lydia. Now all of a sudden this earthquake happens in front of him, and it creates this chasm underground. Curious, he goes inside and sees a large bronze hollow horse with windows, kind of like the Trojan horse, but bronze. He crawls through one of the windows and finds a corpse with a gold ring on its finger. He takes it off and puts it on himself. Later on, he realizes that if he positions the ring in a certain way, he becomes invisible. With this power, he sneaks into the king's castle, seduces his wife, attacks and kills the king, and takes over the kingdom. Glaucon asks, what would happen if we had 2 rings, and gave one to a just person and one to an unjust person? Now no one, it seems, would be so incorruptible that he would stay on the path of justice. And if we're being honest, we can see where he's coming from. Maybe you got bills to pay or things you want in life. It'd certainly be tempting for someone to put on that ring and take whatever they want. That new PS5 Pro is going to cost $700, but not anymore. Now some of you might be a little hesitant to concede to Glaucon, but I want to bring up a modern day example of the Ring of Gyges that does show its corrupting power. Online anonymity. You ever come across the most horrendous or mean-spirited comments or even content on the internet and think, wow, I bet you wouldn't say that in person. That's because, like the Ring of Gyges, their reputation is protected. To be fair, we do have usernames and other identifiers which we personally connect to. So if someone ever said Philosophy Tunes is a big fat nerd, sure it's not as effective as using my actual name, but it still connects, you know? But even then you must admit that relatively, people are more boldly mean on the internet than in real life. So you gotta be honest with yourself. If you were given a Ring of Gyges, how would you act? This whole story shows how meaningless it seems justice is without some further justification or external consequences. In trying to get to the bottom of justice and injustice, Plato wants to strip away all the external consequential reasons someone might be just. He wants to examine why justice is good in itself, not because of the reputation or rewards you might gain from being just, but justice itself. I mean, think back to some of the good acts that you've done. Didn't you get some sort of external reward? Maybe you told someone about it so you could subtly brag about your good deed. Maybe you actually got some material compensation. This is thinking about the Ring of Gyges in reverse. Sure, it might tempt you to do evil if it won't affect your reputation, but would it also deter you from doing good since you won't reap external rewards? Does this make justice reliant upon something else for it to be good? At this point in the video, I want you to think about a good act that you've done that had no external rewards. Think hard now and be very tough on yourself. Deriving any external reward makes that act ineligible. Even just seeing a smile or getting a thank you from someone who's homeless when you give them some cash disqualifies that act. Can you think of one such act that fits? And if so, put it in the comments below. I have 2 points to bring up about the Ring of Gyges story. One is a little silly and the other is more serious. Let's start with a silly one because you know that's the one you want to hear first. I think there's a very funny counterexample to the Ring of Gyges, and that is vigilantes and superheroes. People who hide their identity and therefore cannot reap any significant consequential rewards for their good acts. Granted, they still probably feel satisfaction in seeing someone they rescue thanking them, or seeing their superhero name positively mentioned in the press, but they personally are not receiving any consequential rewards. But actual vigilantism is not really like comic books, and superheroes only really exist in fiction. So don't take this point too seriously. I just thought it was funny and interesting. My second more serious point is that I actually think it might be impossible to separate a good act from any external reward, and that might say something about the nature of good acts in themselves. Let's take a captured soldier being tortured for information. They refuse to give in, and as a result, are suffering some extreme external hardships. Even in this extreme scenario, where so much physical consequential pain is being inflicted, I believe that soldier might still be able to reflect on his moral act and the consequences of it, and feel a consequential psychological pleasure as a result. But that's just my example. Try to think of one yourself. itself. Try to think of any extreme example where one does a moral act and would not feel any consequential benefit from doing that act. It seems impossible not to feel some pleasure when you do anything you believe is good, even when there may be an onslaught of other negative consequences. But what does this mean? Well, it means it's impossible to view justice in isolation itself, because a positive consequence might necessarily follow. But if a positive consequence will always follow a good act, again, even if there are a lot of negative consequences as well, does that mean there is something positive about the nature of justice in itself? So getting back to our Ring of Gyges, sure. I think if you mass-produced them and everyone got one, this world would go to hell. And yeah, maybe you and I would be those people who do evil with such power. We just don't realize it yet. But is it really so absurd to believe that someone would use the Ring of Gyges for good? You may strip away the consequential benefits of a good reputation or even material benefits, but I could see some people doing good even without such things. And perhaps this is because of the inescapable positive psychological benefit that results from doing good. But anyways, that's the video. Let me know what you would do with the Ring of Gyges. Me? If I'm being honest, I'd probably go into Costco with no membership just so I could get those $1.50 hot dog drink combos. But if you enjoyed this video and want more philosophy content, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. And with that, I wish you all a beautiful rest of your day.